Hey everybody, Mr. Andrew here. Thanks for joining me for Circle Time. That song you just heard, you may recognize, but if you don't, it's from Star Wars, and I will tell you why in a minute. But first, let's take a look at our calendar. So, we know that we're in the month of April, and help me count the days. So get out your pointer finger and use your voice, warm up your voice to say me, 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 and get ready to count. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's a 7 right there. Today is April 7, and yesterday was Monday, so today must be Tuesday. So we know today is Tuesday, April 7, 2020. And I have a shape for us today, and let's count the sides of this shape. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. And we saw two other shapes that have 4 sides. A square has 4 sides. A rectangle has 4 sides. But does this look like a square? No. Does it look like a rectangle? No. It's something different. It's called a trapezoid. Can you say trapezoid? Help me clap it out. Ready? Trapezoid. One more time. Trapezoid. It's got 3 syllables. So a trapezoid is a little bit different. It has these 2 sides that are diagonal. That means they're not straight up or straight to the side. They're not vertical or horizontal. They're diagonal. Can you make diagonal? So this is vertical, horizontal, and diagonal. Diagonal just means it's not straight up and down. So let's put this trapezoid with its 2 diagonal sides and 2 horizontal sides on our calendar. Put it right there on number 7. So repeat after me. Today is Tuesday, April 7, 2020. Now let's get out our 1s and 10s cups. Here we go. And let's take one from our happy face cup, because we're happy today is here, and let's put it in our 1s cup. So we should have 7 in our 1s cup. Help me count. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. We've got 7 1s. No 10s yet, but when we get to 10, we'll bundle them up and put them in there. All right. So last week we worked on nonfiction books. Those are books about events that happened in real life, like in my life or your life. So this week we're going to work on fiction books. Those are books that are made up, with characters that are made up. So today we're going to start learning a little bit more about characters. And I made this little poster, and at the top I wrote character traits. Can you help me say it? Character traits. So a trait is just another way to describe somebody. So we are going to take a look at a couple of stories right now and use the characters in those stories to come up with some different ways to describe characters. And we'll write them down here after we finish the stories. So I've got this book called 5-Minute Star Wars Stories. And that's why I chose to play that song for you guys today. So we're going to read a couple of stories from here and look at the characters from those stories and write down a few things on our character sheets poster. So the first story we're going to read is called Race to the Finish Line. A long time ago, on a small planet called Tatooine, a young boy named Anakin Skywalker looked up at the planet's moons. Although he had never left his home, Anakin had always dreamed of going on great adventures and racing across the stars. One day, it looked like Anakin's dreams were coming true. He had met a Jedi Knight named Qui-Gon, who needed supplies to repair his ship. Anakin didn't have money to help the Jedi. So he had entered a pod race hoping to win the supplies. Although Anakin had never won a race before, he knew that he could do it. As the timer counted down to the beginning of the race, Anakin looked at all the other racers. He wasn't worried about any of them, except Sebulba. Anakin knew that Sebulba cheated to win, but he wouldn't get away with it this time. Suddenly, the starting gong rang, and they were off. But something was wrong. Anakin's pod racer wouldn't move. Anakin began to panic. Sebulba must have done something to his pod racer. But Anakin thought of what Qui-Gon had told him right before the race began. Concentrate on the moment. Feel. Don't think. Use your instincts. Anakin took a deep breath, flipped a few switches, and restarted his engines. They roared to life, and Anakin quickly flew away. But he was a long way behind Sebulba. Meanwhile, Sebulba knocked his ship against another racer's. The pod racer crashed off the course and burst into flames. Sebulba laughed. One fewer racer to worry about. Behind the crash, Anakin flew through a cavern and into a deep cave. One of the other racers wasn't paying attention and ran right into some rocks. The ship exploded. Anakin quickly flew around the fire. That was close, Anakin thought. Anakin raced through the stadium. He had 2 more laps to finish, but he smiled. He was catching up to Sebulba. The racers thundered across the planet. Sebulba was still ahead of everyone else, but he wanted to make sure that it stayed that way. Sebulba threw a piece of metal behind him, and it went right into another racer's engine. The engine exploded, and pieces of the pod racer flew everywhere. A piece cut through the cable connecting Anakin's cockpit to one of his engines. Anakin began to spin out of control. But he remembered Qui-Gon's words. Anakin couldn't just worry about his problem if he wanted to win the race. He needed to fix it. Anakin quickly brought his cockpit under control and grabbed the loose cable. Soon, he had reattached the engine and was back in the race. Sebulba and Anakin zoomed through the stadium one last time before the final lap. With all the other racers far behind, Anakin realized that Sebulba was the only one between him and the finish line. Sebulba's pod racer was much bigger than Anakin's. He forced Anakin off the course and high up onto a cliff. But Anakin was not going to be beaten. He changed gears and crashed back onto the course right in front of Sebulba. For the first time, Anakin was in the lead. Suddenly, Anakin saw smoke coming out of one of his engines. His pod racer was on fire. The hard landing must have damaged it. As Sebulba raced ahead of him, Anakin knew he didn't have a lot of time. He needed to fix his pod racer right away. Anakin closed a flap above the engine to put out the fire. Then he quickly pumped coolant into the overheated area. Soon, the engine roared back to full power. Anakin grinned. It was time to win the race. Anakin could see the stadium getting closer and closer as he pulled up right next to Sebulba. Sebulba tried to push Anakin's smaller ship off the course again, but Anakin had a plan this time. As Sebulba rammed into him, Anakin caught his pod racer on Sebulba's. Now Sebulba was stuck. Then, as Sebulba tried to pull his ship away, Anakin unhooked their crafts. Sebulba zoomed wildly off course and smashed part of his pod racer into a rock. Anakin had used Sebulba's own attack against him. Anakin raised his hands over his head as he crossed the finish line. The crowd cheered. Qui-Gon ran to Anakin's pod racer and lifted him high up onto his shoulders. Anakin had done what had seemed impossible. He had won the race. Anakin smiled. One of his dreams had come true. He couldn't help wondering what great adventure he'd have next. Okay, so I've got my book here, and I've got my sheet of character traits. So let's take a look at our first story, and we'll see if we can add some traits to our poster. So first, we have our character, Anakin Skywalker. And right away, we know that he's dreaming of going on great adventures. So I'm going to write down here, one way to describe somebody is adventurous. Adventurous. Great. Let's look at what Anakin does next. So, Anakin meets someone named Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon needs help. And Anakin is ready to help him. So I'm going to say that's really helpful and kind. Let's write helpful. Helpful. And I'll also put kind. Helpful and kind. So Anakin is going to help Qui-Gon by hoping that he'll win the race and get the parts that Qui-Gon needs to fix his ship. So in the beginning of the race, Anakin, something happened to his pod racer and it wouldn't move. But he took a deep breath, he flipped a few switches, and he got his pod racer working. So from there, I can maybe say that Anakin is calm because he didn't panic. He kept his head, he stayed calm, and he got his pod racer to work. So he's racing. Let's see. Oh, here we saw that something happened with his ship, and it broke. But he quickly got it under control, and he fixed it, and he grabbed the loose cable. So I'm trying to think of how to describe that. He fixed his ship. I'm going to put that he was smart. Smart. And then he kept racing and racing and racing. And in the end, he won the race. And he ended up helping Qui-Gon. So, from that story, I've added the following traits to my poster. I've got adventurous, helpful, kind, calm, and smart. Our next story is about somebody different. This is Luke Skywalker, and this story is called A Jedi You Must Become. Luke Skywalker would become one of the greatest Jedi Knights in the galaxy, but he wasn't always a powerful Jedi. In the beginning, he was just a boy, no different from any other. Luke fought bravely as a pilot for the rebellion. He even destroyed the Death Star. But Luke decided that he could best help the rebels if he trained to become a Jedi Knight. In a vision, Luke's old friend Obi-Wan Kenobi said to him, "You will go to the Dagobah system. There, you will learn from Yoda, the Jedi Master who instructed me." Luke knew that Obi-Wan would appear to him only if his message was very important. Luke and his droid R2-D2 flew to Dagobah right away. Dagobah was not what Luke had expected. He thought a Jedi Master would live on a beautiful, serene world. But this was not what Dagobah was like at all. The planet was wet, muggy, and crawling with bugs, critters, and wild animals. It could be summed up with one word: gross. When Luke landed, his X-Wing fighter sank right into the marsh water. Suddenly, Luke felt someone watching him, and he spun around. Standing in front of Luke was a pale green creature with pointy ears. "I am wondering, why are you here?" the creature asked. "I'm looking for a great warrior," Luke replied. The creature shook his head. A great warrior. Warts not make one great. Luke had to admit that the creature had a point. I'm looking for a Jedi Master, he explained. Oh, Jedi Master, the creature said. Yoda. You seek Yoda. The creature promised to take Luke to Yoda. But first the creature stopped at his home and fed Luke dinner. With no sign of Yoda anywhere, Luke grew impatient. We're wasting our time. The creature turned away from Luke. I cannot teach him. The boy has no patience. He is not ready. Luke suddenly realized that this was no ordinary creature. Yoda. Yoda laughed at Luke. Adventure! Heh! Excitement! Heh! A Jedi craves not these things. You are reckless. Luke told Yoda he had learned so much already, and he was not afraid. Finally, Yoda agreed to train him. Luke's first test was to run through a swampy obstacle course. As Luke trained his body, Yoda helped him develop his mind. Yoda, a Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, Yoda said, never for attack. Luke began to understand that being a Jedi was less about him and more about helping others. Luke also learned to move objects with the Force. One day, Luke stacked a tower of rocks with his mind, while standing on his head. But as Luke placed the final rock, his X-Wing began to sink deeper into the swamp. Luke lost his concentration and fell to the ground with a thud. Thinking about trying to raise his ship from the muck, Luke said to Yoda, moving stones around is one thing, but this is totally different. No different. You must unlearn what you have learned, Yoda said. Luke concentrated again. He knew that he would one day have to confront Darth Vader, the powerful Sith Lord. He needed to be as strong in the Force as possible. Luke turned back to the sunken X-Wing and said, All right, I'll give it a try. Yoda stopped Luke, saying, Do or do not. There is no try. Luke concentrated on Yoda's words and lessons, letting the Force flow through him. Slowly, the X-Wing began to rise. Luke was as surprised as R2-D2 was excited. The little droid exclaimed with his own brand of beeps and whistles. But as Luke struggled with his doubts, he knew that an X-Wing was very heavy. How could he possibly manage to lift it? Slowly, the ship sank back into the swamp. Luke was sad and discouraged. I can't. It's too big. Size matters not, Yoda said. Look at me. Judge me by my size. Do you? Yoda reached out with his tiny old hand, and the ship began to move. Yoda concentrated even more, and the ship floated through the air until it came to a rest on solid ground. I don't believe it, Luke said, astonished. Yoda replied, That is why you fail. Luke continued his training, more determined than ever. One day, Luke saw a vision through the Force. He saw his friends Han Solo and Princess Leia, and they were in trouble. They had been captured by Darth Vader. It is the future, you see, Yoda explained. I've got to go to them, Luke insisted. He couldn't bear to think that Han and Leia were in danger. Luke knew that a Jedi Knight was a defender, not an attacker. He acted out of protection rather than anger. It was a Jedi Knight's duty to put other people ahead of himself. Luke felt that he had come far enough in his Jedi training to make his own decisions. Luke decided to put his Jedi training on hold and go rescue his friends. "I'll return," he told Yoda, "I promise." As Luke's ship took flight, Yoda wished that he had more time to help Luke prepare. Luke's battles would not be easy, but he was good at heart. No matter where he went, the Force would be with him always. The end. Okay, let's look at this story. A Jedi You Must Become, featuring Luke Skywalker. So in the very beginning of the story, it tells us that Luke was brave. He was a brave pilot. So I'm going to get out my character traits poster and I'll write brave. And Luke decided to become a Jedi to help the rebels to defeat the Empire. So I'm going to write helpful. Oh wait, I already have helpful. I'll put a little check next to it. Scratch that one out. Let's see, what else do we have? So Obi-Wan comes to him and he decides to go to Dagobah. And his ship sank. He met this creature. And let's see. At first, Luke was a little bit impatient. He couldn't really wait to meet Yoda. So let's write down, we'll say a little bit impatient. And as we see throughout the story, he actually kind of loses this trait. So traits can change sometimes in characters. So, Yoda starts to train Luke. He's doing this obstacle course. He's lifting rocks with his mind. I'm going to say from there that we know Luke is a hard worker. I'm going to write hard working. Awesome. Let's go through the story a little bit more and see if we can get any last traits out of here. So Yoda tells him to try to lift the X-Wing. He doesn't quite do it. But then he has a vision where he sees that his friends are in trouble. And he insists that he has to go help them. Even though he hasn't really finished his training, he puts his friends first. So there's a word for that. It's called loyal. Can you say loyal? Loyal. That just means you really love your friends and you're willing to help them. So that's about the end of the story. Yeah. He goes off to try to help his friends. The end. All right, friends. Thanks for reading stories and exploring character traits with me today. I think we got a pretty good start on our poster of character traits. We got adventurous, helpful, kind, calm, smart, brave, impatient, hardworking, and loyal. Those are some pretty good ways to describe a character. So I just want to ask you, my friends, as you are reading stories later today with your grown-ups, think of some character traits and maybe even start a little poster of your own. I'll keep adding to this today as I read stories with Bear. So thanks for joining me today, and I hope everybody has a really good day. Bye.